major trial is underway in California that could have huge consequences for how social media platforms are designed and used. Meta is being accused of designing Facebook and Instagram to be addictive to children. Lawyers for 29 U.S. states accuse Meta of deliberately hooking young users and keeping them online while misleading the public about the risks. California, Colorado, Kentucky, and New Jersey are the states leading the trial. The states are calling for billions of dollars in financial penalties for Meta, as well as changes to how the platforms operate. Meta strongly denies the allegations and says it has made a long-standing commitment to supporting young people. We're joined now by our North America technology correspondent, Lily Jamali, who is outside of the courthouse there. Lily, thank you for joining us. What did you hear in court?
Well, we started by hearing from the Deputy Attorney General of California, Megan O'Neill, who tried to draw a contrast between public statements that have been made by Meta executives about how safe their platforms are and what they knew based on internal research, internal surveys that they had taken of users on Instagram. And there is quite a stark contrast based on what Megan O'Neill said today. We also heard her talk about how, in her words, Meta hid the truth about the potential harms of their platforms. Then we heard from Meta's lawyer, Paul O'Neill. He talked about how Meta has been very transparent about potential harms and that they've taken their research and done something with it, put it to action by creating tools to protect teens and young users on their platforms. You could also see him trying to soften the potential impact that some of the internal documents that we're going to see may have on this jury. That includes internal emails between Meta employees.
Lily, remind us what the stakes are here, just how consequential this case is.
The stakes are potentially very high. You have the legal firepower of the attorneys general that have brought this case. We're at 29 states, and it's being led by 4 of them, including California. They are pushing for penalties, but they're also pushing for business model changes to be implemented by Meta. They want to see the end to infinite scroll. They want to see changes to push notifications and other things that keep especially those young users on the platform for longer.
Okay, our North America technology correspondent, Lily Jamali, thank you so much for that reporting. Okay, let's get more on the story now with Connecticut Attorney General William Tong. Connecticut is one of the 29 states suing Meta. Mr. Tong, thank you so much for joining us. I want to go through this, through some of the points here and what Meta has said about this lawsuit. So if we start about the accusation of creating features that are addictive to youth, Meta has said it is taking steps to protect young people. It is working with parents. It has added features, for example, to remind teens to take a break if they've been scrolling too long. So what is your response to Meta's defense there?
My response is that we know what their strategy is, and that is to hook, hold, harvest, and hide. And they're hooking our children onto their platform. They're holding onto them for hours and hours. They're harvesting information, and they're hiding all the bad things that they do. And so if they say they're trying to stop the addiction or they're making changes, what about infinite scrolling? The developer, the scientist who developed infinite scrolling, called it behavioral cocaine. And so they know this, Meta knows this, and we know that they have to make changes to their business model, and they can't blame this on parents and kids.
All question, Mr. Tong,
who are suffering from the addiction.
If I could just ask, is it then up to parents, schools, let's say other adults in a child's life to make sure they're not spending too much time on social media?
Yes, as a parent of a 20-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 15-year-old, sure, we play a role. But this has been an avalanche. We are defenseless against this technology, against algorithms that constantly send our children. I have 2 young women in my house, sending them content that's not just addictive, but harmful and leads to depression, self-harm, and worse. And so to say it's on parents is laughable, because even the parents struggle with the addiction.
I want to ask you about the point that Meta lets users make multiple accounts so kids can get around some of those parental controls or rules for underage accounts. Meta says it does deactivate any account that it suspects as underage. So what more action could Meta possibly take?
They told us that they were not capable of age gating, of really policing their platform to make sure that young people, particularly young people 13 and younger, weren't on their platform. And then all of a sudden, a couple years later, they say, no, wait, we can do age gating. And so they've lost all credibility on these issues. It's up to Meta to find a way programmatically, technologically, to keep kids off the platform who aren't supposed to be on the platform, who are 13 and under. That's the law.
I also want to ask you about the damages being sought here. Meta calls this, and it could be up to $1.4 trillion, an outlandish sum, vastly disproportionate. And it's not that the Wall Street Journal editorial board had written the following. The real goal of state attorneys general and plaintiff lawyers is to barrage Meta with lawsuits and then pressure it into an enormous financial settlement, a la with tobacco companies in the late 1990s. What do you make of that comparison?
The goal is to protect children. And if you want to use the tobacco settlement as an analogy, look what happened there. We entered into that settlement more than 20 years ago, and we cut smoking in half in this country in that intervening time. Half of American adults smoked 20 years ago, and we've cut that number dramatically. And so these huge cases and settlements work to address the harm that we're fighting against, and that is the addiction that our children and adults are now saddled with, and then the harm from the content that they feed us, that the algorithm feeds us, the harvesting of our personal information, and all the damage that does.
In the end, what do you expect from Meta in terms of how their platforms should change?
I expect Meta to get real about the amount of time that children and all of us should be on the platform, to get real about ways that they can programmatically control how much time a young person spends on the platform, control when, in the overnight hours, young people can access the platform, to control the addictive measures and tactics that they use to keep us looking at our devices and infinitely scrolling. And to do much better on content moderation. What worries me most is frankly, when the president took office a second time, Mark Zuckerberg seemed to retreat from content moderation. He seemed to say, I don't really care about content moderation. I don't much care about all of the smut and the dangerous content that our children see. We want him to take that seriously again.
Okay, Connecticut Attorney General William Tong, thank you so much for joining us on our program tonight.